Obviously, things are going incredibly well over in Atlanta. Over the weekend, according to the New York Post, an angry crowd took to the streets of Atlanta on Saturday night, smashing windows, torching a police car in response to the death of a 26-year-old protester on Wednesday, reports said. By the way, when they say 26-year-old protester, they mean someone who shot at police. Atlanta Police Chief Darren Scherbaum told reporters multiple protesters were found with explosive devices on them. One of the devices was used to set an Atlanta police car on fire. So those would not be protesters. Those would be violent rioters. I've been to protests before. And see, the way that I can tell the difference between a protester and a violent rioter is that protesters don't have a bomb on them. I know, it's subtle. It's a subtle thing. Protesters who hit the streets after calling for a night of rage by Antifa members were also seen throwing bricks at the Atlanta Police Department vehicles and smashing property, largely in black neighborhoods. So you had a bunch of spoiled white rich kids throwing bricks through the windows of black businesses, in the name of social justice and all. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp condemned the protesters' actions on Saturday night. He said violence and unlawful destruction of property are not acts of protest. They are crimes that will not be tolerated in Georgia and will be prosecuted fully. Apparently, the protests began peacefully marching in the city around 5 p.m., when some members then began smashing property. The mayhem came after a person named Manuel Esteban Paez Terran was shot and killed by Georgia State Patrol troopers who were trying to clear protesters camping near the site of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center dubbed Cop City. So what exactly did Paez do? He shot and wounded a police officer. And the media covered this as though a peaceful protester had been slain by the police, as always. Bad media coverage helps facilitate this sort of rioting. And then there were headlines that were coming out of Atlanta after half the city got burned, or at least after significant violence took place, suggesting that these were peaceful protests. It really is an amazing thing how the media will go out of its way to determine, based on political causes, whether something is a political protest or whether it is a violent act of rage. If it's a right-wing thing, then you have to ban every symbol associated with it, up to and including totally legit symbols like the thin blue line. But if it's Antifa burning down a city, you have to say that it's mostly peaceful. By the way, the footage from the Atlanta Antifa Night of Rage, pretty ugly stuff, guys. It didn't go amazing over there.
We now understand they're marching through the streets of downtown Atlanta. Courtney Francisco, our reporter, is there with them. Courtney, what's going on?
Well, right now we're walking toward what we see here, Chase Bank, the Hard Rock Cafe. Police presence swarming downtown, but you can see fire are working to extinguish that right now. We've also seen windows broken out at what I believe was a hotel. And over here to my right, you can see officers are setting up some caution tape to rope this off.
A bunch of people, by the way, were in fact charged for their crimes. Virtually all of them are white. I believe all of them actually are white. So just excellent job, as always, by the Antifa dopes, as well as the media that seems tempted always to cover for Antifa's violations in the name of, presumably, their political agenda. We'll get to more on this in just 1 second. First, if you are tired of the government playing games with your savings and your retirement plan, you need to get in touch with the experts at Birch Gold today. See, here's the thing. Gold has always been the most stable store of value, like throughout human history, across civilizations. You can own gold now in a tax-sheltered retirement account. Birch Gold makes it easy to convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in precious metals. Text BEN to 989898. Claim your free info kit on gold. Then talk to one of their precious metal specialists. When you purchase from Birch Gold by January 31st, you'll get a signed copy of my book, How to Destroy America in 3 Easy Steps, which seems kind of like the Biden administration playbook these days, with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers, and countless 5-star reviews. You can trust Birch Gold to help protect your savings today. I bought gold because I was tired of my money being controlled solely by the folks over in Washington. I mean, they really do control the direction of the stock market these days. They control the future of your 401k. I wanted to diversify, so I got involved with the folks over at Birch Gold. If you want to be more like me, text BEN to 989898. Claim your free info kit. Get a signed copy of my book. That's BEN to 989898 today. Also, you may have noticed that the business climate has been rather bumpy for the past several years, from COVID to Biden inflation and now to stagnation. Well, here's the thing. If you've spent a bunch of money on taxes and you could get some of that money back, why wouldn't you? You need to call up my friends over at Innovation Refunds. If your business has 5 or more employees and managed to survive COVID, it could be eligible to receive a payroll tax rebate of up to $26,000 per employee. It's not a loan. There's no payback. It is a refund on your taxes. The challenge is how do you get your hands on it? How do you cut through that red tape and get your business the refund money? Head on over to getrefunds.com. Their team of tax attorneys are already highly trained in this little-known payroll tax refund program. They've already returned $1 billion to businesses, and they can help you as well. They do all the work, no charge up front. Simply share a percentage of the cash they get for you. Businesses of all types can qualify, including those who took PPP, nonprofits, even those who had increases in sales. Just head on over to getrefunds.com, click on Qualify Me, answer a few quick questions. This payroll tax refund is only available for a limited amount of time. Don't miss out. Go to getrefunds.com. That's getrefunds.com. Okay, meanwhile, another continuation of a shocking story that was reported by Luke Rosiak last week. So Luke Rosiak, the investigative reporter here at Daily Wire last week, he reported on a shocking story of a 14-year-old who was found sexually assaulted and trafficked in Texas after she had fled her home. She ran away from home. She was 14 years old, claiming she was transgender. She ran to Maryland. She was then found with a pedophile, or an alleged pedophile. And then, instead of the state returning her to her parents, they said her parents, her adopted parents, her grandparents, that they apparently were not in line with her new gender identity. They called her a her. And so she couldn't be put back with them. So instead, they placed her in a Maryland foster home. She ran away and she ended up being sex trafficked in Texas. Well, now it turns out, where exactly did she come up with the idea that she was a boy in the first place? At school, of course. According to the Federalist, in August 2021, by concealing a teen's newly asserted transgender identity from her parents, Virginia's Appomattox County High School participated in a chain of events that led to that girl falling into the hands of sexual predators not once but twice. When the FBI found Sage in Maryland, where she was victimized by a sexual predator, a judge refused to return her to her parents on the grounds they were abusing her and not affirming her as a male. Housed in the boys' quarters of a children's home away from her parents, she told her mother she was assaulted again. The girl soon fled, then was brutally sex trafficked again until her rescue in Texas by law enforcement. Apparently, Sage was essentially mainlined into all of this stuff in school. Sage is a slight, pretty 15-year-old girl with elfin features and an edgy style. Recently, reflecting back on her transgender identification, she told her mom, quote, "I don't know who I was. I'm a totally different person now. I never was a boy. Everybody was doing it. I just wanted to have friends." So basically, her school apparently started socially transitioning her. They started calling her by a male name. School records indicate school staff were calling Sage by her chosen male name and pronouns, and at her request, concealing this from her parents. Sage recalls her school counselor telling her during her first week of school that since she identified as a male, she could use the boys' bathroom. School records also indicate bullying, although they don't capture the severity of what Sage eventually told her mom. Boys were following behind her in a group, touching her, threatening her with a knife, violence and rape, and even shoving her up against a hallway wall. On August 23rd, according to school notes, reports were received from students and teachers that Sage had used a boys' bathroom and encountered hostile boys there. The school counselor met with Sage the next day to direct her to use the nurse's bathroom for safety reasons. Again, they never actually contacted the parents. By the time they did contact the parents, Sage was basically gone. When you have educational institutions that are outright participating in the sexual indoctrination and destruction of children, our society has gone irredeemably awry. How bad is this particular situation? The situation is so bad that even the New York Times is beginning to notice this. I know that here's how it works in the world of transgender coverage. First, the transgender movement comes out with a statement that is just not true. A statement like, boys can be girls. Then somebody argues with it. Somebody says that's not true. And then the media immediately label that person a bigot and a transphobe and a terrible person. And they say it's absolutely untrue. And if you oppose the original argument, then this must mean you want trans people to die or some such nonsense. Right? J.K. Rowling is a murderer, is the argument. Then, about 2 years later, the New York Times reports the counter-argument that was always correct. So now the New York Times, shockingly enough, is actually reporting that maybe schools should not be socially transitioning kids without making parents aware. Quote, Jessica Bradshaw found out that her 15-year-old identified as transgender at school after she glimpsed a homework assignment with an unfamiliar name scrawled at the top. When she asked about the name, the teenager acknowledged that at his request, teenage teachers and administrators at his high school in Southern California had for 6 months been letting him use the boys' bathroom and calling him by male pronouns. Mrs. Bradshaw was confused. Didn't the school need her permission, or at least need to tell her? It did not, a counselor later explained, because the student did not want his parents to know. District and state policies instructed the school to respect his wishes. His. It's a girl. There was never any word from anyone to let us know that on paper and in the classroom our daughter was our son, Mrs. Bradshaw said. The Bradshaws have been startled to find themselves at odds with the school over their right to know about and weigh in on such a major development in their child's life, a dispute that illustrates how school districts, which have long been a battleground in cultural conflicts over gender and sexuality, are now facing wrenching new tensions over how to accommodate transgender children. The Bradshaws accepted their teenager's new gender identity, but not without trepidation, especially after he asked for hormones and surgery to remove his breasts. Doctors had previously diagnosed him as being on the autism spectrum. The reason I read it that way is because one of the things that they found at the Tavistock Children's Clinic in Britain, which was just shut down, is that there's a wildly disproportionate number of autistic kids who had been mainlined into transgender ideology and then mutilated. Doctors had previously diagnosed him as being on the autism spectrum, as well as with ADD, PTSD, and anxiety. He had struggled with loneliness during the pandemic, and to his parents, seemed not to know exactly who he was because he had repeatedly changed his name and sexual orientation. Given those complexities, Mrs. Bradshaw said she resented the fact the school had made her feel like a bad parent for wondering whether educators had put her teenager, a minor, on a path the school wasn't qualified to oversee. It felt like a parenting stab in the back from the school system, she said. It should have been a decision we made as a family. The student, now 16, told the New York Times his school had provided him with a space to be himself he otherwise lacked. He had tried to come out to his parents before, he said, but they didn't take it seriously, which is why he asked his school for support. This is absurd. Schools have pointed to research that shows that inclusive policies benefit all students, which is why some education experts advise schools to use students' preferred names and pronouns. Educators have also said they feel bound by their own morality to affirm students' gender identities, especially in cases where students don't feel safe coming out at home. Wait, so why are educators' sense of personal identity and morality the issue here? Who hired them to do this? Who allowed them to pervert children this way? There's no other arena of American life where you would allow a teacher to pervert a child this way. Seriously, a child comes to school and says, I'm a sex addict. A child comes to school and says, I'm engaged in sex with an older person. That's immediately reported to police and or to parents. A child says, I want an aspirin, and that gets reported to parents. A child comes to school and says, I am a member of the opposite sex, and the teacher's like, well, my moral scruples say that it's my job to help socially transition the kid. The key line in this article from the New York Times, by the way, is this one. Many advocates for LGBTQ youth countered that parents should stop scapegoating schools and instead ask themselves why they don't believe their children. There's no legitimate room for debate, according to these advocates for LGBTQ youth. They are your surrogate parents. They're stealing your kids. And then they are pretending that they are the advocates of good. They said ensuring schools provide enough support for trans students is more crucial than ever, given the rise of legislation that blocks their access to bathrooms, sports, and gender-affirming care. Every state in the union needs to immediately pursue legislation that forces educators to let parents know what the hell is going on at these schools. This is perversion. It is a form of ideological grooming, at the very least. It is the destruction of children in the name of a perverse ideology. It is godless nonsense and logicless nonsense and reasonless nonsense. And it has serious, real consequences, from every kid who's being indoctrinated into this crap to specific kids who end up sex trafficked in Texas because schools decided to lie to their parents in the first place. Alrighty, guys, the rest of the show is continuing right now. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be getting into the notion from the media that Israel is turning into a fascist country. It's absurd. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click the link in the description and join us.